Here as one of your elders, and I hope that Archbishop Tutu will also be here as another of your elders, because we want to think about your future. We want to understand that what you'll be about in your 40s in 2050, will you? Round about that. And you want a world that will be safe and green and peaceful. And that is the message that we've been trying to bring home in this incredible day where here in Copenhagen, but in so many places, in Australia, in Africa, in all over the world, people are demonstrating today. And why? Because we want this conference to be more people-centred, to understand that people are hurting because of climate change, that people's livelihoods are being undermined because of climate change, that it's real and now, that it's hurting the poorest countries that have not been responsible. Many of us capture that idea by talking about climate justice. We say the 50 poorest countries have contributed less than 1% of the greenhouse gas emissions, but they are the ones that are hurting. I was with Archbishop Tutu a month ago in Cape Town. We heard from 5 farmers from 5 different African countries. Some of them are here. Constance from Uganda is here. She told us that there are no seasons now in her part of Uganda. It's drought and flooding, drought and flooding. The school has been undermined. Their health care is no longer available. It's undermining all of the human rights and the Millennium Development Goals. And she wants the country governments that are able to contribute to an adaptation fund, to contribute to a fund that will be real for the countries that are trying to cope. They need to have low-carbon strategies. They need coping mechanisms. They need a minimum of $200 billion a year, every year, for the years when the new agreement, the new binding agreement, the fair, ambitious binding agreement comes into effect. And they also need help now. As we know, they need the fast-track minimum of $100 billion. This is very modest in terms of financial bailouts, in terms of armaments, the defence budgets of the world. Just look at what's paid for in defence budgets that could destroy the world, only they're actually just doing nothing except threatening in an abstract way. We need to focus on the fact that climate is about people as well as the science and the environment. I sometimes worry slightly about the images we've had. I love the images here. I love the fact that people, children, as you said yourself, mothers, I'm a grandmother, all of us are part of the focus, because if the image is a melting glacier, which is actually very, very important and very worrying, or the polar bears on the ice that's melting, and I love polar bears, it's still distances. It's still kind of scientific and not really giving us the full rounded sense. For me, the image of climate change is a poor farmer, a poor indigenous woman, and she is desperate because her livelihood is being undermined. She doesn't know how she's going to cope. She doesn't know how she's going to have a future, to educate her children, to have access to healthcare, to have a livelihood. She may have to move from where she is. She may be on a small island which is going to go under, which is why when we talk about 2 degrees centigrade, it's the outer limit. We need to be way below 2 degrees centigrade. That's what you've been marching about today. That's what we've been talking about. It is absolutely vital that we get the messages across to those who have a big responsibility. This is not an ordinary conference. It's not a conference like a trade conference. Trade conferences can fail. Sometimes it's better if they do fail. But this is a conference which mustn't fail, because Lyle has a right to a future. And all the children that are represented in the world and that have been with their parents marching today and with their grandparents marching today have a right to a future. I make it very personal, Lyle. Today is the birthday of my oldest grandchild, and he's 6 today. So the other 3 are younger than 6. And they will be in their 40s in 2050. And they want and should have, and every child should have. But apart from that future, which the elders have been emphasising, we were with our grandchildren recently making that case, we know that for many it's not a future, it's now. And the worry of people whose livelihoods is being undermined when the rich world has been responsible for it, the industrialised world, is a matter that is an ethical issue, it's a moral issue, but to me, as a human rights person, it's fundamentally also a justice issue. It's an issue of the importance of understanding that we have to enable the poorest countries to have a low carbon development through an appropriate adaptation fund. But the interesting thing about climate justice is it's not just the injustice of the case at the moment. It's if you look at how we stay well below 2 degrees centigrade, it will need the poorest countries to be part of the solution, to have a low carbon development, the 3 billion who will be added to the population. So, in fact, the very interesting thing about climate justice, and this will be my last point, the very interesting thing about climate justice is it means that we have a world where we can no longer talk about them and us. When we talk about development aid, we still talk about them and us. And if we have a financial crisis and the rich countries are going through difficult times, often self-inflicted, then it's very much a them and us. And when we're suffering, we cut back on the aid budget, or we don't increase it, or we move money around and pretend that we're keeping our commitments, and we're not. That's a them and us attitude. But if we understand that the poorest countries and the poorest peoples have to also be part of keeping below the 2 degrees centigrade, having a low carbon development, but having the right to development and having the possibilities of moving to that low carbon development in a way that doesn't make them poorer, that enables them to move because of the adaptation funds that the rich world must have and must decide upon here and must enter into binding commitments on, as well as the commitments to have the mitigation that we require. And we are not asking for too much in saying at least between 25 and 40% cuts. I think it's time the European Union triggered the higher figure that they say they can do, triggered from the 20% cut that's on the table to the 30% they said they would do if others would move. That's not leadership. We want the leadership now of moving so that others move. And that's the way in which you get to the mitigation that we need. So, can I pass to you now while we're waiting for Archbishop Tutu? I'm sorry, I got carried away, but this is very, very, very important.